Hello and welcome to Weekly Wind-Up on Kirklees Local TV. I'm Kyle Warwick and this week I'm joined by Sarah Clarke from the Yorkshire Wartime Experience. Welcome to the programme, Sarah.
Hello, thank you.
Now, for those who don't know and for those who didn't make it to this year's event, what is Yorkshire Wartime Experience?
The Yorkshire Wartime Experience is now the biggest northern show for military vehicles, reenactors and battle reenactments. This was our 6th year this year. We have over 400 military vehicles. We have dozens of reenactment groups and living history displays over a 12-acre site. Wow.
So it being a wartime experience, how much of a focus is there on an educational aspect? I know that some people look at reenactments to an extent and think there's a lot of fun involved in it, which undoubtedly to a certain extent there is, but there's also an educational element as well, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it is very much a fun, enjoyable event for all of us involved, but there is definitely the educational aspect. Our reenactors and vehicle owners, they don't do it to dress up and look cool. They do it because they want to educate. They have a massive amount of knowledge about the history behind what they're representing, about the groups, the uniforms, the armoury, everything. And that goes right through from sort of the World War I period, World War II, and then we also have the post-war as well. Quite a few of our reenactors as well are actually ex-forces, so they do know, they have experienced that kind of life.
Right. And to what extent do the reenactors buy into it? I've heard of certain events where reenactors in Civil War, American Civil War, where they'll live in the tents and things like that. Is that something that happens?
Absolutely, yes. Our World War I group, one of our World War I groups, they live in their tents and everything from the Thursday night normally right through until the Sunday. Some of our reenactors will even sleep in the trenches. And they take the whole thing really seriously. They will use the correct cooking equipment, things like that. So you don't see a tent and inside it is electric hookup and all the usual sort of camping luxuries that you get nowadays. They're using original mess tins, kettles, stoves, things like that.
Having been to this year's event, I mean, it was spectacular on a very large scale, a lot of pyrotechnics, and it seemed like it would take a massive team to organise. What is the organisational process like, and how many people are involved in it?
There's about 8 of us.
8?
Yeah, there's 8 of the organisation team. Yeah, that are sort of the main structure. That have a lot to do, and we work 12 months of the year to plan. We've got a meeting in a couple of weeks ready to debrief from this year and to start planning for next year. We then rely obviously on a lot of volunteers that will come year after year. They're very reliable, they're hard working, but they have great fun. And then of course our reenactment groups and things, we do have a lot of those guys that will help us out with bits and pieces throughout the show, so we always have a good support from various people, whether it be locals or reenactors that have travelled long distance to help us out.
And I know as well from being there this year, the pyrotechnics, there was a lot of explosions, a lot of fire. Setting something up like that must take a serious amount of professionalism. Who are the team that are involved in your pyrotechnics, and does setting up something that has such a large level of safety involved, does it impact on the day in any way?
It does to a certain extent, yeah. We have to put in extensive planning. The guys who do our pyrotechnics are professionals. They're employed in that role, and there is a lot involved. They've got to make sure that everything's set up absolutely perfectly, not just for entertainment purposes, but obviously for safety purposes as well. And anything can have a minor impact on that or a major impact. So, for example, on one of the days we had the World War I reenactment was running slightly behind. Because of that, the pyrotechnicians then couldn't get set up for the next battle in the main arena, which then obviously put a bit of a delay on their battle because they've got to allow a certain amount of time to make sure everything's done properly and correctly.
Ultimately, the final battle, there was it must have been nigh on hundreds of people on the field, so just in terms of not even thinking about the crowd, which is obviously a massive safety concern, but just the safety of the reenactors as well. That must be a big thought process that you go through.
Absolutely, yeah. They have to make sure that the areas where there are the pyrotechnics are marked off sufficiently for the reenactors to be able to see that. We also have big briefings before every battle, so that the reenactors know exactly what's happening and where they can and can't go. Because yeah, absolutely, they're the ones that are up close and personal to those pyrotechnics, and we need to make sure that they're kept safe as much as the public.
Indeed, yeah. So, small team, 8 people. How much of the show do you actually get to see?
We get to see quite a bit of it. You know, we do an awful lot of running around in the sort of weeks and months running up to it. But we do get time to appreciate everything that's going on, and we always try and at least see one of the battles as well. But we do have a great team of sort of supporters that are always there to help out whenever needed.
Yeah.
So,
do you have any highlights from this year's show?
My highlight this year was the smoke ring that happened on the Sunday from one of the battles. It was intentional. Our pyrotechnicians set up for a smoke ring. It is a bit of a crowd pleaser. People sort of see it and notice it. Because it was really calm day, weather-wise, it carried quite a distance. And before we knew it, there was national press and even international news covering this mysterious smoke ring. So it was quite interesting to sort of see this all over the papers and online. So. And
did it come back then? Did you get a little bit of publicity out of that then?
We did, yeah, and it was quite funny because I rang round the sort of local newspapers and the national newspapers to explain what it was so they could obviously solve their story. And it was nice to have sort of that bit of publicity saying that yeah, it came from our show, we done that.
So you mentioned the educational aspect, and going back to that, do you have a lot of involvement from schools? Do schools like to come? Is it an event that they engage with?
Absolutely, yeah. On the Friday we open up our gates to schools to come and visit. We book them in. We send out sort of booking in forms and things for them to come and visit us. It's great for the schools to come on the Friday because they can get up close and personal to the living history displays. They can hold weapons, things like that, and talk to the reenactors. Because we've not got such a large number of public on site, they're getting a lot more information from the show. So absolutely, the schools are a big thing for us.
Yeah. And is that something that you're looking to carry on with in next year?
It is, yeah. One of the things we're hoping to do next year is the problem that we do have with schools at the moment is a lot of the schools don't have very much funding. We've seen it all over the press about schools losing funding, having to, lose members of staff. A lot of the problem for getting to our show is the cost of the transport for them. So I'm hoping that we can get some kind of funding or sponsorship from bigger businesses in the area, something like that, so we can put on those coaches, so we can invite the school kids to come and see our show and the schools aren't having to pay for it. Absolutely.
So how would, if somebody was watching this and they wanted to get in contact maybe and find out how they could help, how could they go about helping, and how can they get in contact with you?
There's so many different ways to help, whether it's coming up to our show and actually being a marshal and, from the support team there, which is great fun. It's a bit of hard work, but it's great fun as well. To the publicity side of things, so like we go to other shows and we hand out leaflets and things in the weeks and months running up to the show. And then of course, as I say, the financial side of support. We do all this, we don't get paid, and we do it for the love of it. But unfortunately, it's not a bottomless pit of money, as much as we'd love it to be able to put on whatever we'd like. So even if people would like to help us with sponsorship, donations, paying for some of the school trips, things like that, we'd more than welcome information from people to help out.
Yeah. And do you have a website or anything that people can go to, and Facebook page?
Yeah, we've got a Facebook page, just search the Yorkshire Wartime Experience. We've also got our website, which is www.ywe-event.info.
Quite a mouthful.
It is, yeah.
No, that's been brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us today, Sarah. I've enjoyed talking to you.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Good. So that's all we've got time for on this episode of Weekly Wind-Up. Remember, you can find Kirklees Local TV's Yorkshire Wartime Experience video on our YouTube page and across our social media platforms. That's all for this week's edition of Weekly Wind-Up. Join us again next week. Goodbye.